In other news, Louisville started blockading their downtown area yesterday in anticipation of quote-unquote civil unrest following the impending announcement in the Breonna Taylor case. The city encouraged businesses to close and teachers to work from home while the courthouse boarded up their windows. This began yesterday morning and the announcement was made earlier this morning. The grand jury indicted former Louisville detective Brett Hankinson, one of the officers that served the no-knock warrant at the Breonna Taylor residence, with first-degree wanton endangerment. Okay? This was because the detective, quote-unquote, fired blindly through a wall and or doorway, and I believe it said three, may have been a different number, but I believe they said 3 bullets entered a nearby apartment where a supposed pregnant woman, her husband, and child were home.
Evidence shows that officers both knocked and announced their presence at the apartment. The officers' statements about their announcement are corroborated by an independent witness who was near in proximity to apartment 4. In other words, the warrant was not served as a no-knock warrant. When officers were unable to get anyone to answer or open the door to apartment 4, the decision was made to breach the door. After breaching the door, Sergeant Mattingly was the first and only officer to enter the residence. Sergeant Mattingly identified 2 individuals standing beside one another at the end of the hall, a male and a female. In his statement, he says that the male was holding a gun, arms extended, in a shooting stance. Sergeant Mattingly saw the man's gun fire, heard a boom, and immediately knew he was shot as a result of feeling heat in his upper thigh. Kenneth Walker fired the shot that hit Sergeant Mattingly, and there is no evidence to support that Sergeant Mattingly was hit by friendly fire from other officers. Mr. Walker admitted that he fired 1 shot and was the first to shoot. In addition to all the testimony, the ballistics report shows that the round that struck Sergeant Mattingly was fired from a 9mm handgun. The LMPD officers fired 40 caliber handguns. Sergeant Mattingly returned fire down the hallway. Mattingly fired 6 shots. Almost simultaneously, Detective Cosgrove, also in the doorway, shot 16 times. This all took place in a matter of seconds. In total, 6 bullets struck Ms. Taylor. Medical evidence obtained by our team indicates that only 1 shot was fatal. Further medical evidence shows that Ms. Taylor would have died from the fatal shot within a few seconds to 2 minutes after being struck. Detective Hankinson fired his weapon 10 times, including from an outside sliding glass door and through a bedroom window. Some bullets traveled through apartment 4 and into apartment 3 before some exited that apartment. At the time, 3 residents of apartment 3 were at home, including a male, a pregnant female, and a child. There is no conclusive evidence that any bullets fired from Detective Hankinson's weapon struck Ms. Taylor. The KSP ballistics analysis did not identify which of the 3 officers fired the fatal shot. After receiving that information, I asked the FBI Crime Lab to conduct its own analysis to see if they reached the same results. The FBI ballistics analysis concluded the fatal shot was fired by Detective Cosgrove. Our office looked at both reports to determine if there were major differences in the procedures used by each lab that would have led the FBI. With a thorough and complete knowledge of all evidence collected in this case, lawyers with our Office of Special Prosecutions presented the findings of our independent investigation before a grand jury comprised of Jefferson County residents beginning on Monday and concluding today. while there are 6 possible homicide charges under Kentucky law, these charges are not applicable to the facts before us because our investigation showed and the grand jury agreed that Mattingly and Cosgrove were justified in the return of deadly fire after having been fired upon by Kenneth Walker. Let me state that again. According to Kentucky law, the use of force by Mattingly and Cosgrove was justified to protect themselves. This justification bars us from pursuing criminal charges in Miss Breonna Taylor's death. The truth is now before us. The facts have been examined, and a grand jury comprised of our peers and fellow citizens has made a decision.
Now, it's no doubt, if you haven't figured it out by now, this indictment was purely to appease the masses of BLM rioters and mobs. In no world would or should an officer who's being fired at by any person, whether it criminal or not, be charged with endangerment for returning fire in a shootout situation. Especially since Kenneth Walker, Breonna's boyfriend, was shooting as well as arrested, and then he had the charges dropped. Now, Walker is now suing the Louisville Police Department. His story has been very inconsistent, if I do say so myself. I mean, to say the least, it's been very inconsistent. He said at one time they were watching TV, then he said they were asleep, then reports said that that Breonna was supposedly killed while she was sleeping in bed, but was dead in the hallway. One report says that they were fooling around at the time. Which is it? It doesn't matter what they were doing. He fired a gun, striking a police officer while they were serving a warrant. Okay? One neighbor from some reports has said to be corroborating that they announced themselves. The officers themselves said that they announced themselves even when they didn't have to, because that's what a no-knock warrant does. You don't have to knock, you don't have to announce yourself. That's what it is, by definition. You cannot shoot at the police, hitting one, and then sue them for doing what they were supposed to be doing. But in this case, in this Wario world land that we live in, you can. This entire indictment boils down to officials wanting to appease the mob mentality. Nothing more, nothing less. In no way should an officer be punished for returning fire that struck his colleague from an apartment where a known drug running has happened. Okay? It has been proven that packages had been delivered that contained drugs at that apartment. Whether it was a previous boyfriend, whether it was this boyfriend, that doesn't make a difference. The fact is that they had her name, car, address, date of birth, everything on this warrant. So it wasn't like they just were at the wrong place at the wrong time. It's not like they didn't have some sort of probable cause. You can't just go to a judge and say, hey, I need a warrant, and the judge go, okay. It just doesn't happen. Okay? I will not debate this because it's stupid, it's silly, and it's slightly offensive that a man who fired a weapon at cops, hitting one and resulting in his girlfriend's death, should have any right to attempt to receive a monetary or judiciary value from that situation. Period.